Really, the whole idea of getting a ball to bounce is to change its x and y, obviously, okay? So when I first start out, this loop runs, and it moves x by 5 and y by 5, the position of the ball. So it just hops along and moves 5 and 5, okay? But the problem is, once it gets to an edge, it needs to go down 5 and in the y direction, or left 5 in the x direction. So the code that does that is 4 if statements. I have 4 here, 1, 2, 3, 4. One for the top of the screen. Basically says, if I hit the top of the screen, change the direction of my y step. The Chad way to do that, okay, is not to actually set y step to -5, like I could have done, but it's the best way to do it is to change it by timesing it by -1, which will reverse its direction. X as well. If X is ever bigger along the right edge of the screen, make X step bounce the opposite way. If Y is ever less than -160, so that's the bottom of the screen, make Y bounce in the opposite direction. And then if X is ever along the left edge, make X bounce in the opposite direction. So that's what gets the ball bouncing in all the directions. The nice thing about this method with the -1 times the step, I could go up here and change the speed of even just one direction and make it bounce a little bit differently. See that? Now my X is a little faster than my Y, and it's at more of an angle. I could make them 9 and 9. I could even make them like really fast, like 100 and 100. And it should still just bounce. See that? Looks silly, but it does bounce. Okay? So that is the benefit of going in and actually putting in these little -1 times their steps. Okay, so now we're going to make a paddle. So let's do that. Let's choose a sprite, and I'm actually going to paint this one. So under choose sprite, hit the brush. And I'm just going to carefully draw a little rectangle here. You can pick whatever color you want. I'm actually going to try to start it at the center of the costume here as well. So there's the center point of my costume, and I'm going to just drag a rectangle over like that. That'll give me some, and that's a decent size. I can see that on the screen there, and I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, but you could always go back and pick a corner and drag it around or do whatever you want there. That's probably a little bit too big for me. But I do like to have my paddle centered at that little origin of the costume. Let's do that there. Shrink it a little bit in a Y direction too. It's not a bad looking paddle there. You shrink it up a little bit. Okay? So there we go. I'm going to put mine at the bottom of the screen as well. So I'll get out of the costumes. I don't have any code for my paddle yet, but I'm going to go down here and put it right there. Okay? And the code I'm going to put in there is not much for the paddle right now. I am going to put in a when the green thing is clicked. You could switch between the code of your ball and your paddle now. You have 2 sprites. We haven't really talked about that too much, but I'm going to say go to, and that way my paddle always starts down here when I start my project, which is nice. See that? No matter where I move it. I'm not going to move it with the mouse, actually. I'm going to move it with the keyboard, but cool. I'm liking that so far. I'm going to put in a forever loop on this one too, because I want to constantly check if someone's pressing the keyboard so that the paddle can move back and forth. Where do I check if the keyboard is pressed? I believe it's under sensing. It's right there. You pick the key down there. So I gotta pick A and D. So if A is pressed, I want to move the paddle to the left. So let's go and find an if statement, because this is a 6-sided figure, right? So go in there, put if A is pressed, then what do I want to do? I actually want to change the X position of my paddle, so I'll find in the blue under motion where is my X position. And I could go change X by -10. That should make my paddle move to the left. Yeah. So it does move to the left. I'll duplicate that code. And I'll say if the D key is pressed, I'll change it by +10. There, now I got a paddle moving. So that's nice. I could actually even stop it from going off the screen if I wanted to with some clever tactics. I'm not going to do that right now. But that is how you get sprites moving with a keyboard, which is nice. You just need it to be in a forever loop. If it's not in a forever loop, it'll only check it once. The first frame your program runs, and that's it. Watch. Won't let me move it. Okay? It has to be in a game loop. Okay? When you run a game at home and you're running FPS and it says 78 FPS, that means all the code is running in a loop that's running 78 times per second. So when you make little projects and games in coding, they have to be in a loop that's running all the time, constantly updating. Okay? It gives it that sense of motion to have this loop running 30 times a second or however long it takes to run it. Okay. Is that recording?
I think it is.
Okay, great. So to get the ball to see if it hits the paddle, what we basically have to do is just make sure it's between the right and left edge of the paddle. Okay. So we could do that fairly easily. We know the X position of the paddle and the X position of the ball. And then we also have to see if it's ever tries to go below the paddle. If it does, just bounce it up. So we have to check if it's between here and here, and if it tries to go below the paddle, bounce it up. That's going to be our goal. It might be a little glitchy if it ever comes down through like this on a quarter or something. It might try to bounce through, but that's the best we got for now anyways, is to... there are other more advanced techniques where you like find the distance between the ball center and the closest point on the rectangle, and then as soon as it gets there it like bounces off. But that's really advanced. We just want to see if it's between here and here and if it ever goes below the paddle. So let's figure out. I think what we'll do here is we should actually go back to our paddle code and make a variable that finds us the X position and the Y position of the paddle so that we can use it in our ball code, okay? Because this ball code has an X position here and a Y position, and the paddle has an X position and a Y position, but they can't talk to each other. They don't know what their X position and Y positions are. So what we'll do is we'll make a variable, two variables. We'll call it paddle1X. And the second variable I'll make is paddle1Y. Like that. Okay. And I will set them every frame. So I'm going to set paddle1X to the X position. That will ensure that I have saved in my program where the paddle is. I'll do the same thing for my Y paddle position thingy variable. Okay. Paddle1Y is equal to Y position. Like that. Oops, I just messed that up. Now, to test it, I'm going to run it, and I'm going to see if they update. See that? X is updating. That's great news. Y is not, because I'm not moving it up or down, but that's okay. I just need to be able to store it to use it. Every time I move my paddle, I can see that position. Great. Okay. Now what I'm going to have to do is go to my ball code and figure out how I'm going to figure out if the ball is between the right and left edge of the paddle. Left. Okay. this is the tricky part. I'm going to have to make an if statement. If, yes. Okay, so let's look here at my paddle and my X position. My paddle X and my paddle Y have the same position, okay? It's because my paddle's reference point is at this in this top left corner, and my ball's reference point is at the center of the ball. That is what we got from the costumes. Okay, the ball's right in the center. Remember I told you it was beneficial to draw your paddle right from the center. Okay? So that's going to help us, because now they have the same X position when they're both like on the top left corner or whatever. Cool. So let's just say here, if the ball's position is ever greater than the paddle's position, so I'll pick a greater than sign. I'm on the ball code, so I'll grab X position here. If it's ever greater than my variable for my paddle's X position, okay. But now I need an and, because I also want to see if it's ever less than the right side of the paddle. So I'm going to grab a and symbol here. Kadook, kadook, kadook. And I'm going to grab a less than. So I'll say if X position is ever less than, where are you, X position? Now I got to figure out how big my paddle is, because this should be paddle X plus the size of my paddle. I got to figure out how many pixels my paddle is here. Can we go check that out? Let's see. If I move my paddle... Wait. My paddle X is 178. And my ball position on the right edge is minus 56. So what's that a difference of? How long is my paddle in pixels? What's the difference between minus 178 and 56? Minus 56. Gotta get out my calculator here. You later. See you later, calculator. Hello? Calculator. Hold on, my computer's so slow it can't start the calculator. Oh, there it goes. Okay, I gotta figure out how long my paddle is. I guess there's a couple ways to do it. Is there? From this distance from here to here is apparently minus 178 to minus 56. Yours might be different, but that's like about 120 pixels, I think. Just to make sure, I'm going to go minus 56. Take away minus... Where's the minus button on this thing? Take away 178 minus. It's 122. So my paddle, when I drew it, was about 122 pixels long. Yours might be different.
Did you check yours?
I go 120. Okay. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm just testing to see if the ball's ever between these 2 points, even when the paddle's moved. If the paddle's over here, I just want to make sure the ball is in between these 2 points. If it is, I'm going to bounce it up. So what's my code to bounce the ball in the Y direction? It's this set command right here. Okay, watch what happens. Whoa. Look, whenever my ball's in between the paddle now, it tries to bounce constantly. It's kind of buggy, eh? If it's not above, if it's not between my paddle, it won't do it, but if it is between my paddle, it does it. And that's because I put that in there. I said, if it's ever between the left and right edge, make it bounce. Well, it's constantly between the left and right edge here, so it's bouncing.
Jeez.
Kind of a fun game, eh?
Jeez.
So I need one more if statement in here to make sure that the ball is also like trying to get through the paddle.
I am so confused.
Now, How am I going to do that? I'm going to have one more if statement inside of this if statement right here. And I just need to know when my ball is lower than the paddle's Y position. So what's my ball's Y position here? Let me just look it up. It is minus 129. If my ball is ever below 130, I'll say bounce it up. So here I will say if the ball position is ever less than 130, minus 130. It's getting kind of complicated, isn't it? You can see how just a small task for this computer is very difficult. There's some math involved as well, right? So now it should not only check to see if it's in between the paddle, but if it's trying to go below the paddle, then it will bounce it. See that? It actually works well. Let me stop that, show you a few glitches that can get involved there. One of the glitches is if I go below the paddle but I hit the corner. Sometimes it gets sucked into the paddle. There's not much we could do about that right now, but watch. Try to hit the corner here. See that? It's got kind of an issue where it's not quite between the paddle's X and Y position, but it's still below it, and then it gets trapped in the paddle and doesn't know how to get out until it bounces. That's okay for now. There's no good way to deal with that right now.
I'm really confused.
But it does work pretty well. Okay. So that is how we get a paddle to bounce. It's quite a lot of work. You can even add yourself a comment here. Paddle bounce. What we actually had to do was we had to go to our paddle code, make variables that were set to the Y position and X position of our paddle. And then we had to go to the ball code and make a big if statement to check if the ball was between the paddle's X left and right edges. And not only that, if the Y position was below 130, then we had to bounce the Y in the opposite direction. Crazy stuff. But that's, I think, a good, solid way to get to start a Pong game. Okay. There are some scratch things. There's some code in here that's let me see here. If on edge bounce, that's Scratch's built-in bounce code if it touches the wall, but it's not very useful for us. We have much more control when we control the X and Y position of our sprites. Then there's also if touching other sprites, you could say do something, but we're not going to use that either. We actually figure out using the X and Y position if they're touching each other or not, and then if they are to bounce. Okay? I'm going to pause that there.